Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to the Resilient Entrepreneur webinar. Just to give you some background, we're going to give you a little bit about the program, and then we're going to talk about the Resilient Canvas. And then we will have some, of course, anytime you could ask any questions that you would like in the chat or in the Q&A section, either way. So this program is designed by our learning from last year and working with entrepreneurs and leaders all around the world, and then reflecting back on the past 30-some years that we've been doing education and training and development for small business and entrepreneurship. And we thought, what were some of the things that we learned during other crises or other even war times or anything else that we've learned? And can we reflect back on what the entrepreneurs might tell you or not tell you based on what we know of them? So just as I continue going, it'll be nice either in the chat or in the Q&A section, either privately or to the public, whatever you want. Just please share with us where you're calling from. That's all. Where are you calling from? All right. I'm going to just give you a little background about me, so therefore you just know who you're speaking with or who you're with today. I'm Faris. I'm the founder of International Strategic Management and the brain behind the canvas that you will be shared with you today. Originally from Palestine, and lived in Kuwait during the first Gulf War, and then I moved to the U.S. in 1990, and I've been in Michigan since 2003. Just to give you perspective, in the early 90s, I started initially by doing T-shirts, wholesaling them and retailing them. Then I worked in some of the other retail stores. Some of them are really big department stores, some were smaller department stores, and helped turn around some of their departments and did merger and acquisitions for a couple of others. And then I moved into the technology in the late 90s, where I started selling online. And then in 2003, we founded ISM, which is focused on entrepreneurship, small business development, and programming. I've been fortunate because I've worked with over thousands of organizations and thousands of entrepreneurs all over the world. And you could see just obviously not possible to put all of them here, but we chose a few that you might recognize and a few that you might not recognize, just to give you a perspective of the depth that we have had learning from so many wonderful people all around the world. We have roughly reached almost, over 60-some countries all around the world. Our mission is to really support entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship establishment of organizations, whether it's programs, leadership, or anything else in between. These are what I call, I want to move through these few slides really fast so we can get to the program, just the pillars that we work with. And the reason I bring this up, because many times you might have a different experience or different background that you could actually add to the conversation. I'm speaking from the experience of globalization, entrepreneurship, technology, education, and community. And this is where the experience have come from for the past 30-some years. So therefore, while it's nice, it's also limited to these experiences that we are facing or that we learned from. You can see more of these numbers on our website, but here's a glimpse of it. So just to give you perspective, over 100,000 hours working with entrepreneurs in 60-some countries. So let's talk about the Resilient Entrepreneur Canvas. You clearly now can see the canvas, I'm hoping. And when you see the canvas, you're going to notice we're going to walk you through it. So before I walk you through it, I just want to elaborate on how did we get here? There are lots of canvases out there, and there are lots of ways to do what you're doing. And what we learned throughout the years is that, especially when a crisis comes, and each crisis is different. There's not one crisis that is the same of the last one. We learned that a long time ago, right? Each one is so different and is so unique. In the same time, there are some characteristics or some things that you could learn from it that could allow you to move things forward in a different way. So as we started making this call, and last year in March, we started by opening the calls for anyone around the world to call us, to walk us, to discuss how they would walk through their business. And what we learned from them, listening to them, and then of course reflecting back on what we know of them and what we know having worked with them and what we know that they're doing now and what we know that they were doing in the past. And then we said, let's pause for a minute, and that was around September. So let's look back and what happened in 2008, 2001, 90s, And all these other times, what did people do? Whether it's a war, whether it's a medical crisis, whether it's an economic crisis, or any other crisis, what did people really do as far as leadership and entrepreneurship? And we started reflecting back, and this is what we came up with. And this is our, our latest canvas per se. Latest canvas that we have developed. And what it is, we're going to start with the mindset. Then we're going to talk about the self. Then we're going to talk about the business side of it. And then we're going to talk about how to move it forward. Now, you will see really quick, and if you are one of those resilient entrepreneur, that you might have done all these steps. You just never thought about them in this systematic way or approach. Although once you start reflecting, what they told us right away is that it's exactly what they did, not knowing that this is what they were doing. So the goal would be is to engage you in this conversation. So therefore you can kind of see what the canvas is and walk through those steps, and then potentially gain some knowledge of how you could leverage this framework. So therefore, moving forward, you don't need the canvas. Hopefully you will have all these insights with you. Now, clearly we do this over usually 5 weeks. I'm going to give you today 1 hour of it, and I'm going to try to give you the essence of it. So therefore you could try to do it yourself. So one thing that you learned really quickly about all of these resilient entrepreneurs is that they always were adapting. They never really stayed still in a way. Things was always changing around them, and they just had to keep on moving around. Not necessarily themselves physically, but I'm talking about their ideas, their concepts, and how they do business. So always adapting to what's happening, and change is always part of their conversation. So we're going to start with the mindset. And the reason why we picked that first, because they all had a specific mindset that was really clear after talking thousands of them, that they had a way of thinking that some of the others that we talked to as well did not really have, or not to this level. So we're going to talk about these 3 things that we saw that it was clear that they all showed it. The mindset of an entrepreneurship or entrepreneur, the mindset of leadership, and the mindset of compassion. Now, I will put a star next to compassion because those things seems to even show up more when it was a health crisis or a war zone or something like that, much more than if it was an economic crisis. So what's the mindset? Well, if you're here today with us, you're clearly an entrepreneur. Excuse me. If you're here with us today, you're clearly an entrepreneur or a leader in your community, and you already have this mindset. What happens in crisis is sometimes we forget what it is. And it's really not about, and I've heard all kinds of stuff. An entrepreneur is someone who risks everything. An entrepreneur who does this, an entrepreneur who does that. You might describe what I'm going to call the characteristics of an entrepreneur. But what was clear for us, the entrepreneurs, is really a way of thinking. It's a mindset. You see a problem, you look for solutions. And it's about leveraging the resources that you have to either create an opportunity for your community or to create or to solve a problem that exists. Now, the gain or non-gain or loss for financials has nothing to do with the mindset. Now we're talking about business, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I just want to highlight that the entrepreneurship from our perspective is really the way you're thinking. And are you looking for problems to solve, or are you looking for opportunities to create? Those are kind of like the 2 paths that you could choose from. Now, under those 2 paths, depending on who you are and your background or what you've done, there could be that you have to be an entrepreneur or you want to be an entrepreneur. Those things can also make a difference on how you approach things. So just wanted to make sure that we know when the canvas starts, you want to start with the entrepreneurship mindset. What does that mean to you specifically? Then you want to start thinking, what opportunity, this is the question you want to ask yourself, what opportunity am I creating for my community or for my people or for where I live or for the community that I want to serve? Or what problem am I going to be solving for them today? And we're going to talk about a few examples. For instance, last year, when COVID hits in early March, many people couldn't go to the restaurants. Maybe we were afraid to go to the restaurants. Many neighborhoods where I live actually started creating kind of like a carpool. We will pick up your food. You just order it. We'll bring it off and drop it off for you, as long as you pay for it, right? So they started coming up with different solutions. This is really what we're talking about here, that mindset of I see a problem, I could solve it, or I see an opportunity, I'm going to take, and I'm going to jump on it. All right. So that's the mindset. So in your mind, for your own business, you want to say, what problem am I solving, or what opportunity am I creating? That's the first thing in the mindset. The second mindset we want to talk about is leadership. And the reason why we felt this is important in the crisis time, or as a resilient entrepreneur, because you actually may be the only one doing something now, unlike the other times when you were just maybe starting another business, just like the person next to you. This time, you actually might be more than ever stepping onto new territory, a new area that maybe no one in the community that you live in is doing. It might be done somewhere else, just not in the community that you're trying to serve, or not to the groups of people that you're trying to work with. That became clear, and this is important because it's somewhat uncomfortable when you're the leader, because now it's a crisis, and now you're choosing to take a different directions, or you're taking, moving forward with some ideas, and maybe no one is behind you, no one is supporting it. And of course, I always mention here, you of course want to make sure that it's safe and and safety and security for your people and for your customers and for your community is part of the conversation, because you don't want to do something that's clearly too risky that could put some people in danger, or rest their security. I'm just saying, on a mindset of a leader, you might have to step up and move on and do something that maybe you're not getting a lot of support of, as long as you have done your necessary homework. So just know that. And because you're stepping up, there are also kind of obstacles, all kinds of obstacles. So for instance, in that one example, restrictions of movement. So how many people go to the store or not? Well, now you might have to wait in line for 2 or 3 hours before you get into the store. Now you have to have certain kind of, masks. Now you have to have certain kind of desanitizations for your store if you're running a store. Either side of it, you had all kinds of different challenges. So think about the leadership space of it. In your case, you would say leadership, one, maybe I'm the first one in my community, or two, I can create maybe a network of leaders that could support me, or three, it could be like, I need to do X, Y, Z to make sure that it's safe and secure for the people that I'm working with. The last thing is with the mindset, and I'm sorry if I'm moving too fast. I just want to make sure that we cover this information in the 45 minutes slotted hour that we scheduled. And we want to make sure that you also have time for questions and answers. And if anyone is interested, we could also bring you to the stage if that's something you want to do. So the mindset of compassion, especially during crisis, you got to be able to show that you really care, right? This is a tough time for many people. Some people lost their loved ones, some people lost their friends, some people lost their colleagues, and you want to make sure that you're really showing some compassion in dealing with either the customers or the staff or the partners or anything else like that. I always use this example. This is an example because we saw it firsthand. Initially, if someone called and they were looking for an answer now, if you didn't respond within a day or two, they got really mad, or they were not happy with you. Now, it seems to be like people are a little bit more understanding if the person's having to wait on a call, or if the person's having to be called back. These things were almost unheard of pre-COVID. So you can see that there's some kind of thing that's happening around you, and you want to just be aware of it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't call, or you shouldn't take your, you shouldn't take your time to make the call. I'm not saying either or. I'm just saying showing some compassion that you care and you understand, because sometimes it's an urgent matter and you're not able to fulfill it. You want to make sure that you at least show that you're compassionate about the issue or the challenge, and you are working to solve it. We saw that most of the time in the large corporations, they started sending letters saying that, for your security and for your safety, we want to make sure that we're taking these steps and measurements. Do you like them or not? These are the big guys doing it, or ladies, or companies, or people. And you might want to learn from it of what you could do within your own startup or your own small business. All right. To summarize it, those entrepreneurs who've been with us before and who've taken a pathway of an entrepreneur of their own, you really can see yourself here probably clearly in 4 stages or 5 stages, whatever way you want to look at it. And although in the past I would have, had you guys go to different rooms and discuss it, my point to you here is, one, is you're going to be doing it a lot of times. It might feel like you by yourself, might feel like you're creating a miracle out of the desert, planting some seeds, might feel like it might break or it might go away. But with consistency, being able to adapt to the changes and being able to use the different tools that you may have, excuse me, you will notice that with time, it gets to where you want to go. So think about that from an entrepreneurship, leadership, and compassion perspective. This mindset, what we've seen from entrepreneurs who kept moving forward and actually prospered, or kept, somewhat in the same level that they had before, or close to it, with a crisis or a pandemic, they really just helped them keep moving forward. And as I said before, not necessarily that they sat down and said, what opportunity am I going to solve? They might have done it naturally without thinking. And we took that learning and said, what can we learn that someone else can see what someone else did, so therefore you can learn from it? And that's why we're discussing this canvas. So now that you have the framework, next crisis comes up, think about, what mindset do I have? Do I have the entrepreneurship? Do I have the leadership? Do I have the compassion? Do I need to add to it? Do I need to take something out of it? I don't know. But based on our learning, these are the first three things that was up in the mindset that allowed them to move forward. The last thing we're going to close with is they had the whole concept of being, victim versus victorious. And what we learned is that all of them were, they never believed that they're done. They just always believed that they're developing their mindset to be, if a crisis happened, I'm not going to sit there and say, why me? If a crisis happened, they're not going to sit there and look at this, I'm going to be in trouble. Well, in a minute, we're going to talk about that. But they always felt it's an opportunity for them to be the leader or to take things moving forward. It's an opportunity for them to be more of a, standing with the flag versus taking the flag down. So this whole concept of being victim, of like, look at me, how sad I am, or I'm being abused, or this is happening to me or to my community or whatever, they actually took the approach of, actually, no, we're going to do great, and here's why. So this, remember, this is a developing mindset. It's not necessarily an end mindset. Now that the mindset is done, what we started listening to their conversation, we learned really quickly that they have what I'm going to call the self-awareness of me and what's around me. And I'm going to make that sure that you understand how to take that knowledge to take it to yourself as well. So under self, you're going to see that there are two boxes, and the first one is me. And the first thing we noticed that many of them initially struggled with acknowledging that there's even a pandemic, right? They wanted to deny it. Those who were resilient and they kept going, they just really quickly acknowledged it and said, hey, you know what? So this is what you would do here. Acknowledgement. You put two dots and you say, what do I acknowledge right now? I am in a pandemic. I am in a new zone. I do have an opportunity to create something new. I do have an opportunity to solve a new problem. Whatever that is, just acknowledging it. And that's the step that many of them, those who stayed resilient, did. The second thing, and this was an interesting and fun way to discover it, many of them were afraid to say, I'm freaking out, no one's going to show up to my business. I had to shut down for 2 weeks. I had to shut down for 3 months. I had to shut down, whatever it is. Well, it's okay to freak out. You just can't freak out for the whole 2 weeks. You just can't freak out all the time. Freak out for those minutes or two once you acknowledge what's happening, and then move on. Move forward, right? That's really what it comes down to. So first, acknowledge. Second, if you want to freak out, go ahead and write down, what are you freaking out about? The shutdown, the healthcare, your own health or your own security, your safety, any of these things, just go ahead and write it down so you kind of see it. And that's really what you're doing here. Acknowledging the situation and then writing down what you're freaking out about exactly. The next thing we noticed that they all moved to action. So they might have freaked out, they might have acknowledged it, but then they started moving to action, looking around and seeing, what resources do I have that I could deploy right now from what I already got? And the last thing I'm going to say is to always check the facts. In a crisis or a pandemic, especially in a pandemic, and a crisis actually, you really got to make sure that the source of information is correct. The fact that you're checking is correct. is so easy now for anyone, unfortunately, on the net, can tell you what they think, whether they're an expert or not, whether there really is their field or not. Many people were saying things about the COVID that we don't know if it's true or not, but they were saying it. And then when you start digging deeper, they're not in the medical field, or they're not doctors, or they're not in the area that we should be listening to. So I suggest check the fact, make sure that the facts are true or correct. And then the second thing is check who is the source of information. If Faris told you you should do A, B, or C for a medical situation, I'm going to advise you right now, don't listen to Faris. Why? Because Faris is not a medical person. I'm in the business world. Now, I will also say this. If Faris said, I learned XYZ from the medical resource, I'm going to ask you to think about asking that person, whether it's me or someone else, can I get the resource, or do your own research based on the information that you got? But making sure that you're checking the information and the information source is key. Then we noticed that they surrounded themselves with all kinds of things that allowed them really to move forward. How did they do that? Well, first they started leveraging what they know or who they know, right? Calling the right resources. If I know someone that is in this field, I'm going to call them. Right now, I'm leveraging something that I have. I don't necessarily know the knowledge, but I have a network that will get me that knowledge. So this leverage, right? About getting the extra mile without you having to have it. Then they start letting go of what they can't control. You can't control if someone's telling you have to close. Can't control that. I mean, you can, but then you're going to end up in jail. And if you're in jail, no one can help. It's not going to help you or your customers, right? Or your community. So you want to make sure that you let go of what you can't control. Now, I will also say that we noticed none of them gave up on not wanting to make a change, meaning if there's something that you can't control, but you want to make a change, you could have the long vision and the long strategy to make a change for the future and continue to advocate for it. But at the same time, you got to let go of it at the moment to move forward with what you have. So that's a dance that we saw them, many of them do. And then you got to convert the challenges that you're facing to opportunities that you could be creating or to problems that you could be solving. And that's something that we also noticed that many of them really started doing right away. And what we notice is they start looking around their homes, around their network, around the people that they know, and they start thinking, can I repurpose things, right? I know that I have an extra desk in the house or in the garage, or and I have an extra apartment room that I'm not using, whatever that is. Can I repurpose it? Can I start operating from there since I can't go to the office? Can I do something else? And we actually saw many of them go through stages of that. Okay, first, for instance, in my case, I bought a table from, just a blank table, and then I put a chair on it. Then I bought a bigger table. Then I went in the office and picked up one of the office desks and chairs and brought them into the house. So it might be a transition or a period of time that you keep moving with it, because again, you got to adopt, you got to change, and you got to keep adapting. That was the first thing I mentioned, the ability to adapt to the new settings. And that's something that we saw with many entrepreneurs that we worked with. You repurpose. You start with one thing and you repurpose it. You go look around and you repurpose it. And the last thing I'm going to say about what's around you, making sure that you're surrounded by other leaders like you that keep things moving forward. So if you start taking count of all your friends or supporters and you notice that no one is taking a step, you might want to think about, not saying get rid of them, but you might want to think about, are you surrounded with the right environment to allow you to move forward with the ideas that you're trying to do? That's all about self and mindset. Please, I know I'm moving pretty fast, but I encourage you to either put in the chat or the Q&A any questions you may have or comments that you may have as we continue to do that. And again, if you've lived through this, you probably have done this, but not necessarily knowing that you've done it or having this frame of work to do it. I always say, when it's time like this, you're going to think about why do you do what you do, because your motive will drive you to do more or do less of it. And we saw many businesses either excel because they really love what they're doing and they want to do more. And we saw some completely pivot. And we saw some that took a different directions. One place, as an example, used to have a nice, beautiful seatings in the restaurants and people came and sat down. and during COVID discovered that their passion is really about the food, not necessarily the service that they provide in the restaurant. And as more orders came from online and delivery, they chose to close down the seating area and be 100%, even till today, to be only delivery or carry out. So sometimes you discover these things as you go through it. So you want to think about, why do I do what I do? And can I do it any other way? I kind of walked you through these four, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to say that please avoid staying, stagnant or being stagnant, because what happens in a crisis, things continue to change. And as you know today, now that we've been in it for almost 2 years, counting October 2019 till now, it's really changing. Today's somewhat different than it was yesterday or last week. And it's going to be somewhat different the next week, and it's going to be somewhat different in 3 or 4 months from now. And most likely, according to almost all the reports that I personally have read from experts in this field, they initially said back then in March last year that this is going to be somewhere between 18 months to 3 years minimum, and somewhere up to 10 years maximum. So if you knew that back in March, which I was lucky enough to read that kind of report, then you start planning for it a little differently. Right now you say, okay, I need to have a runway for the next 18 months at a minimum, most likely 3 years. So what is it going to look like as far as me doing what I need to do, whether it's living or working or whatever it is? Remember, think about personal first, wife, kids, husband, whatever it is that you're doing in personal life, and then that will allow you to move forward. And so far, those reports have proven to be correct. We're about almost 2 years into it, and good news is, bad news is, 3 to 10 years. Good news is we're already at year 2. So maybe by next year, this time, or as many of you already started seeing now, some places are already starting to open up. And whatever this new open up means, it's going to be a new normal, not necessarily the old way of doing business. And we've seen this in many places, including big corporations announcing that they'll never require anyone to go back to the office, at least now. Okay. So since we're talking about business, let's just jump into it. So the business category, you'll see there's the third box in here. And in this box, I want to really highlight 4 ideas in here, and this is what we saw them all do. And I have a feeling, again, that you probably have done this. If you're a resilient entrepreneur, you might just not know it. So hopefully this framework will allow you to leverage it over and over now that you have the tools to do it. So let's start with the business, with what you have. So what you have is, what you want to do right away is make a list. Now, I'm not saying it should be 50 pages, but make a list. What kind of list do you want to make? Make a list of all the resources that you have. Make a list of all the products, the partners, the time that you have. If you have 10 employees, you have times 8 hours a day. Well, that's 80 hours a day, right? Now you start thinking a little bit differently about it than, well, they all have a job. I understand, but right now you're just counting the resources that you have, because maybe that job that they were doing is no longer valid, right? Can you utilize them to do and support you in something else? I don't know yet. For now, we're just going to go ahead and list all the resources. Do you belong to a chamber? Do you belong to an association? Did you go to a special school that has alumni group? Any of these things, you want to start listing all the resources that you have. Of course, cash, right? We did not write it down intentionally, but we would, of course, want to make sure that you write cash, lines of credit, credit cards. All of these are resources. Your customers are resources. Your business partners are resources. If you're using a logistic company, whatever that is, it's a resource. So go ahead and make a list. So this is what we saw them doing. And initially, they did it in a short way because they were looking to see, again, back to the entrepreneurship mindset. See, with time, you become an expert at this unintentionally. And then you start doing this automatically. And what we're trying to do here is say, here's the frame. If you're not thinking that way, let's take the time and make you think it and make you work it. So therefore, you could just get used to this way of doing it. So after they made a list, and in your case, in the beginning, it could be that you also have an Adobe Connect software connections, right? Or software subscriptions, Zoom connections, whatever that is. Just make a list of all the resources that you have. If you want to make a note of that right now, go ahead. Make a list of 1 or 2 items, just 1 or 2 of all the resources that you have. your time, your connections, your associations, your alumni groups, sometimes even your neighborhood, right? Or you might belong to a church, mosque, or a synagogue, or any other institutions that you belong to, then they might have a list of directory. All of these things are resources that you have. I'm not saying you should abuse them, but I just want you first to know what are the resources that you have. And now, once you have it, you can start thinking about what can you leverage. Well, I'm a member of this alumni association, and I never really showed up to their network, but can I start showing up to their network? I'm a member of this chamber or association, and my membership level is just allows me to show up to networks, but the next level up, I could easily start joining a committee to serve in and be exposed to other ideas and other people that could potentially not necessarily give me leads, but maybe allow me to rethink about my business based on what I'm hearing others are doing, right? So that's about leveraging, right? It's not necessarily that you have it, but you have access to it, or you could get to it. You may have access to this Adobe Connect and or Adobe products, and maybe you didn't have Adobe Connect, but you could just add it since you already know how to use it or you used it before. So, and smaller add-on than if you're having to do it all over. Think about what can you leverage with what you have. If you already had a Zoom account, you don't have to buy one. You can just use what you had for those 40 minutes when they first initially were doing that. You may have access to training, and you might say, well, but I do need an upgrade for my training. That's fine. Right now, let's just see what you have. Then we could leverage it to get an upgrade if that's what's needed. Or we saw in some scenarios, people had products that was, let's just say for a simplification, one person actually we worked with, she started doing masks during COVID, and she used to sell dresses. And what she did for a leverage is she actually went back and said, I have all this material here that I've cut, not big enough to make a dress, not big enough to make a shirt, big enough to make masks. So that's leveraging what she had of already extra material in the store to become masks. She now also started leveraging that to say, hey, if you, leveraging existing customers, if you bought this dress from me, now I have a mask to match it, right? So this is all about leverage, right? So thinking about repackaging or repurposing things like what I just mentioned with the masks. We saw someone else that used to sell shampoo and conditioner separate, and they put them to package. And then we saw others actually did the opposite. They used to sell them as a package, and now they separated them. Every one of you are going to be different. Every one of you is going to be unique. You have to think about it for your own business. Of course, we would love to work with you on that, but right now, just walking you through what you could do on your own. So now that you did that, now you can start offering it. What does offering means? Well, we're going to try it. We're going to offer it to this customer. We're going to offer it to maybe this new customer segment. We're going to offer it to the existing customer segment. We're going to offer it to new demographical area. We're going to do something, right? And you want to start offering it. The reason why I say you want to offer it initially, because you want to see if there's a appetite for it. Maybe you thought making these cool masks is a cool idea, but maybe people thought, no way, I'm not going to buy a cloth mask. I need a K95 or whatever is at the time N95 needed for their health and security. Maybe they were open to it. So you want to kind of like, I call it test and play, which is the next idea here. Oops. Test and modify, right? So this is where you pilot. You say, okay, I got few people to bite on what I offered. I'm going to pilot. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, moving forward, you buy a dress, I'm going to give you a mask that match it. If you already bought a dress from the last year, I'm going to make you, something to match it. You want to think about that. You want to test it. You want to modify it. You might come back and modify it. Well, they don't really want one mask. It seemed like most of them wanted two. All right, let's go ahead and modify that. They didn't really want the shampoo and conditioner. They also wanted the body wash. Let's go ahead and, combine that. You want to think about that and be ready to make these changes as they come. You might realize we had one scenario, it's a grocery store, and they found a new partnership through one of the restaurants in the area. A restaurant is already there for people to come by. And the restaurant owner was savvy to ask a few questions for the people who came. Excuse me. And what they learned is some of their customers were struggling to go yet to another stop to pick up grocery. So he already was in the network. So he suggested, hey, if you want to place your order for the grocery store, I will have it with you when you come to pick up the food here. And as long as you give me an hour or two, you'll have it ready for you to pick up in the same place. So you might develop this new partnerships. We had another company that used to sell wholesale, and they started going to retail. We had another company that actually was doing retail and they moved to wholesale. So it's an opportunity to really re-examine your business model and do something maybe new, or maybe do something more of what you've done before. So that's what you want to think about here. Now that you've offered it, go ahead and pilot, and then go ahead and test, go ahead and modify, and make the changes that are necessary. I will use us as an example, but we have many examples that we could use actually. And the only reason I'm using us as an example, just hopefully it sparks some ideas in you that you may think about your own business specifically. So we do entrepreneurship training and education all around the world. We've done it, as you know, in 60-some countries. Up till COVID, as a matter of fact, I came on the last trip to the US. So up till COVID hits in March last year, we were accustomed to travel all around the world, almost 200,000 miles a year on a plane, traveling about 10 days a week, 10 days a month. So you can imagine what those 7 to 10 days looked like. And on the ground, it was the same. We had clients all over the state, and we had to fly or drive to them all the time. When COVID hits, we had to take everything online, 100%. There was no chance of going to do it in person, since our work was completely what's called not healthcare related. So therefore, we were not allowed to do business in person. So the shutdown was Friday. On Monday that day, we offered 3 programs right away online. Why did we not wait till the following week? Well, because we knew that especially that we work with entrepreneurs and leaders, they were stuck, not knowing what to do, and they're trying to figure it out. And we have lived through this just because we work with entrepreneurs and leaders all around the world, and we've seen it in so many other times. So we already knew what to do. So we started allowing people to call. So this is again leveraging first resources we have, knowledge from the past, network around the world, other crises that we lived in, materials that we have ready to be deployed online, all these things that we had. We started leveraging it, sending out emails to say, hey, if you need extra assistance, or if you're not sure what to do, give us a call. We'll walk you through it. And initially, it was more facilitated discussion that allowed us to get here today. So we first listed the resources, then we started leveraging what we have, then we started offering some things. We initially offered one of our other programs, which is a business planning tool. We started doing online. The reason why it was easy for us, because it was already a tool online. The one thing that was missing is the actual training of it was in person. We used to do it in 4-hour segments once a week for 10 weeks. And during crisis, we know that people can't do that because now they're at home and they're being distracted by so many things. So we said, let's go ahead and redesign the curriculum. And that took a little bit of a minute, but that's what the weekend was for, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we redesigned it to say, well, it's going to be twice a week for 90 minutes each, and we're going to have a break for 10 minutes in between the 90 minutes. So Tuesdays and Thursdays for 90 minutes. Actually, the first time we offered it was Monday and Wednesday. And the reason why we picked those 2 days, because we realized that people couldn't wait till Tuesday because they were such in panic place already. So when we did it at 8 a.m. in the morning, first thing in the morning, come get it done and move on, 8 to 9:30. So you want to think through that and think about what can you do, what can you offer, what can you pilot, what can you modify. We've changed it since then. Now we have it sometimes from 4 to 5:30. We've done it from 5:30 to 7. We've done it Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we've mixed it up throughout the whole year. We did, 15, 20 different programs since then, but that gives you a perspective of what you could do, right? Sure, there'll be more time to think about it. One thing we learned in our experience, I initially thought it's much better market or margins for me to do it online. And I later, after I delivered the second one, once we did the math, recognized that actually it costs more to deliver online than it was in person. And the math is really simple. In person, we emailed what needs to be printed. Our partner organization printed everything, handed out. One person showed up, delivered the program, went back to the office. Online situation, no one to print. Everything has to be uploaded in a way that is organized and is meaningful for the people to receive it. So therefore, what do we have to do? First, create a database that is managed by someone from our team that could deploy this information based on the cohort or the program that they belong to. We offer 20-some programs. So you can imagine what that looked like. The second, we needed to create, somewhat like a classroom setting. Sure, Zoom can allow us to meet and go, but it's not a place for me to stay connected and have a communications beyond the 90 minutes that we had. So we created classrooms for us to deploy these cohorts. These are the things that we had to do, right? Again, leveraging what we already had, which we already had access to Google, so just had to learn it. So this is where you have to figure out what else do you need to do with what you have. Maybe you need an upgrade. Maybe you need to information. We had Zoom already as an account, but we only had, maybe 2 licenses. Now we have 10. Well, why did we do that? Well, because it allowed us to brand it in a different way, or allowed us to add this webinar, allowed us to do other things, gives me nice reports. I know that how many hours or minutes I'm spending on a Zoom. So these are the things I hope that it sparks you to think through what you could do for yourself. And the truth is, we actually reached more countries today than we did in person. Part of it is capacity, part of it is our reach. And now that it's via Zoom, we're able to do it in more countries than we've ever done before. Hope that it inspires you to think about what you could do for your business, and I hope it did not come across as bragging in any way, form, or shape, because we're still in the struggle that you're still living in, figuring out what needs to be done next. But this hopefully will give you some insights to make you have better, smarter decisions to save time and money. The last block of this is moving forward. And under moving forward, you want to think about these, I'm going to call them 5 tactics or strategies and tactics, because some of them are strategies and some of them are tactics. And the first thing I want to think about is operations. So in the operation management, in the operation management, you want to think about what can you be doing now as far as operations. Your company might have to be working remote. Your company might not, maybe your company is allowed to come in person because you're in the medical field. Whatever the situation is, it's changed because now there's a new procedure. Many of those who stayed open had to put up signs to say, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, do these things, wear a mask, can't come here, you can go only there, all kinds of things that needed to happen. You want to make sure that you take the time to create this operations and operation management. We saw in so many cases, we had actually a local restaurant pizza place, was brilliant. As we all know, pizza doesn't really get touched by anyone's hands because it goes into an oven of 450 degrees, 350, depending on what it is, and it comes out, it gets picked up by a tool, no one's touching it, it gets dropped in a box by a tool, no one's touching it, and it gets cut by a tool, no one's touching the pizza, and then goes in the box and it's handed to the customer. And they did this awesome thing where they said, from our hands, from the time it gets to the oven till it gets to your home, the only hands that it touches is your hands. And they had like a picture of how this process works. And one of my colleagues said that his family would only want to order it from there because they were under the impression that this place operation management did really well and they controlled the environment that they were in to make sure that they're safe and protected. That's important, right? You have to make sure that you know how to move forward with these ideas. Safety and security is important. You want to make sure that you're communicating to your team as well as putting in place systems in place to make sure that people who are coming to your place or you're going to their places. We had customers who said, companies that we worked with said, now we used to have them come to our office. Now we went to their offices. They changed their model because now they had to go and see what's going on. They couldn't get them to take it off and come to see them. So all kinds of things can happen. So make sure that the safety and security when they go somewhere or the safety and security when they show up to you is in place. You will have to determine what that is. Of course, following any guidelines that your country's given you, your city's given you, or your county's given you, because each place, as we all know now, is different. Time management becomes really key because since no longer you have this operating of an office or a building or a business, or maybe you've always been online. Well, now you got to manage your time and you got to allocate some new time especially those who've been in business for a while, they all figure out really fast that they had to come up with time to apply for things, right? To submit proposals, to submit things that they've never done. You want to make sure that you're allocating your time correctly. And this is why it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Think about what you have now, what can you leverage, because time could be one of them. And maybe you have someone in the staff that could potentially move from one role to another, or they could learn cross-function. You want to think about that. And then communications, both internally and externally, is vital, because now you want to make sure that your team is always informed internally. And then, of course, your customers, partners, and supporters outside are also informed externally. So constant communications, I will mention that you don't want to obviously spam people. You should make sure that you're really strategically thinking about the messages that you put out and how often you should put it out. During this shift, I'm going to say it depends on what kind of business you're in. It could be that you have to shift from startup mode to a growth mode, because maybe it's an opportunity to buy other businesses, or opportunity to go after a bigger market, or opportunity to solve a bigger problem, or opportunity to do more business. Or it could be a shift to go back to startup mode and start, figuring out what else needs to happen. Each one of you is going to be different for the business, and this is why we usually do this in 5 weeks with coaching in between. Because based on what information we know of your industry and business, we might be able to have a nice exchange or discussion about, should you be going after growth right now, or should you be thinking this is a new startup and you have to figure out what's your new business model look like. No right or wrong, it's just different. And we've seen both things really work well when you understand the difference between them and how to go after them. I just hope that you ask yourself today with one question: what action steps can you start doing now to make your ideas move forward, as we discussed about this resilient canvas? And I hope that this canvas stays with you with the framework to allow you to think about the next discussions or next point. Before I forget, I'll mention it again: keep testing, keep trying. As many people have heard this before, fail fast, fail quick, fail cheap, and then learn from it. And I know that you can make it. That's the canvas, the mindset, the self, the business, and the moving forward. I hope it was worthy information for you, and I hope that you can gain some framework to allow you to move your ideas forward. And I believe that you already had this information, and I'm hoping that this framework for it gave you a better reference for the information that you already knew. If you want to scan this with your camera, it will download my contact information. I'd love to hear from you, and I appreciate you being with us today. And last, of course, without your feedback, we wouldn't be here today. And because of many others, thousands of before you gave us amazing feedback, good, bad, and allowed us to be better today where we are today. This canvas that I shared with you today is almost the 5th iterations of it. So we learn from each one of them, and we learn from each one of you. And I hope and I encourage you to please provide us any feedback that you have, and good or bad, so we can learn from our experience with you here today. I want to thank you for being with us. I take this opportunity to say it's an honor and a privilege for us to be able to share such information with you. And I hope that you find ways to stay in business.